Where'd all the people go?
Hey, what happened to everybody?
We were going to talk about Miraculous Ladybug.
That's all right. How do you even know?
Because I keep my antenna up for pop culture.
Huh? No.
I'll throw it away. Let me get it. Thank you. Very welcome. That water's free if anybody wants it.
What about the battery here? Can I give it to Ron?
What? Put my tongue against it or what?
Yeah.
What is it like for you all to attend conventions like this and see so many wonderful employees and fans? Have you had any awkward encounters? I don't want to discuss the awkward.
Oh, they're letting people in now.
Yeah.
Oh, look. Oh, God.
They were all just waiting.
There's other people.
Hey, everybody, come on in. Come on in.
It's already the most people that have ever come to a DeFalco Friends panel discussion.
Is it?
Oh, yeah.
All right, welcome everybody to the Comic Legends panel. We are here with comic book legends Ron Friends, Tom DeFalco, Roy Thomas. Everybody give them a hand for coming to our wonderful town. So we're going to kick it off. I'm going to have a couple questions I'm going to ask the fellas, and then we're going to have some audience questions, to have a chance for you to be able to ask a question to one of these legends. So I want to kick it off with Mr. Thomas over there. I just want to know, did you feel a lot of pressure to take over as editor-in-chief after Stan Lee with that legacy, living up to it? What you have, in my opinion?
The pressure I felt was, Stan calls me in one day in 72 and says, and I had no advance notice of this. I didn't know he was in any kind of negotiations. Stan was not a secret sharer as we in those days, or any other days. And he said, I'm going to become publisher, and so you're going to move up story editor was the official term. That's the first I knew about it. So I felt no pressure. My feeling was, am I going to get a raise? The answer, of course, was eventually. And so I didn't feel no pressure, because I'll tell you the truth. Although eventually I became what we call editor-in-chief. Stan had never had that exact term. We did not the same thing. That was just a term he chose. He gave me a choice between executive editor or editor-in-chief. I said, executive editor sounds like somebody in a suit and tie. And I says, I don't like that crap. I said, but editor-in-chief, that sounds like the Perry White kind of guy. That's what I like, so I took that. And but I never felt like editor-in-chief in the sense that it gradually became. By the time Shooter and Ewan took over, it had a little more power, so for over the years. But at the time, with Stan still there, right in the next office, exactly the same office he'd always been in, and me still out there outside without really an office for a little bit, and then with a small office. What I really felt was, I felt I wasn't as much editor-in-chief as I was like shop steward-in-chief. I was just the line guy who got the comics done every day. And I had no ambition to be anything more. What do I care if I'm editor-in-chief or I'm associate editor? I was just there to work with Stan and get done whatever it was, grab up as much money as I hopefully could, whatever I could. And other than that, just, try to do a job for Marvel. Obviously, there was a little more pressure, because suddenly I had to be making a few decisions I hadn't made before, and I was a little more responsible. But, I'd been getting up. From starting from a writer to, editorial assistant to associate editor, just gradually picking up more of that cow, as the old expression goes. As the cow grows, it gets a little heavier. So it was a gradual thing. By the time I took over, it was just like, one more thing with a different title.
Nice. Mr. DeFalco, did you feel any pressure when you became editor-in-chief of Marvel, having to follow the legacies of people like Stan Lee, Roy Thomas, Jim Shooter, and others?
Well, you forgot. Wait a minute. You forgot Jerry Conway and Marv Wolfman for a week.
That's right. Yeah. For a week.
No. Jerry was. And me, I almost came back and said, yeah, Roy almost came back too. Well, what was the question? Did I feel any pressure?
It's a yes or no question, actually.
I'm going to say yes.
Okay, there you go.
My situation is different because I was working under Jim Shooter as his second in command, and I don't want to get
too deeply involved in the history of things, but I could see that the company was getting ready to make a change. And I just assumed that when they made the change, they were going to get rid of the shooter and me, because I was second in command. So you clean out the old wood, you bring new people in. So at one point, the publisher said to me, we're going out to lunch and it's going to be a very unpleasant lunch. So I figured, they're about to drop the hammer. And I went out to this lunch expecting to get fired. And I was, I was cool with that because, I had always considered myself a freelancer masquerading as a staff person. So I went out and, they said to me, we've made a decision. We're getting rid of shooter and we're putting you in charge. And that's what I said.
That's the unpleasant news.
Yeah, you know. Say what? and I was just kind of shell shocked because, like I said, I was going to that lunch expecting to be fired. And then a week or two later, I went to a convention and I met with Stan, and we had dinner together. And I figured I'm going to ask him how to do the job. And I said to Stan, so how do you, how do you do editor in chief? And he said, I don't know. I was making it up. I was going along. And that kind of relieved the pressure.
Yeah. Nice. All right, Mr. Friends, did you feel any pressure being an artist over at Marvel Comics, following the legacies of people like Frank Miller, John Romita, Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko? You just doing your thing?
Well, if anybody knows my work, I do their thing. I didn't get into the industry hoping to reinvent the wheel or anything, so I would frankly take Miller off that list. I mean, I was aware of what he was doing and was making waves and everything, but obviously my work was more of a throwback to Kirby and Romita and the Buscema's.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted. And I wanted to do it since I was 6. So pressure. When they offered me Spider-Man, there was my first emotional response was that I was not ready.
Okay.
But then the reason I took it for the original 6 months that I was being offered was because I knew in my soul that nobody would try harder than I would, having always been a Spider-Man fan and wanting to do it since I was 6. So I knew I'd be giving it my best effort anyway. And so I figured, let's take the shot and see what happens. So that, yeah, I mean, I certainly felt the legacy of doing Spider-Man finally, but but even then, you get to get your toes in doing a Marvel team up here and a Peter Parker there, and and you kind of get to know the character a little bit, and the editors kind of get a confidence in you that you haven't destroyed the character in one sitting,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. That was back when we worried about things like continuity and the character looking like the character from issue to issue and things like
Acting
that.
like the character,
Acting like
talking
the
like the
character,
character.
from in some consistent way. But yeah, mostly it was just joy because I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I'm the kid who dreamed of working for Marvel Comics and ended up working for Marvel Comics. I was doing Spider-Man at 25. It's been all downhill from there.
You were part of that time when the motto would have been, everything you ever thought you knew about the character was right. Now the motto is everything was wrong. Every 3 weeks they have to reinvent it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I finally got off. I said, they read one time too many for me.
I want to ask all three of y'all, like, what, out of all of your work, what are you most proud of?
It depends on what you mean. I mean, the thing I'm most proud of is just having a career, and having a nice long career with, 30, 40 years of regular work, a fair amount since then, and other related things, whether it's conventions, my magazine Alter Ego, the various other books I put together and things like that. That's the thing I'm happiest of. Just the whole idea of having a career that did not involve teaching surly teenagers for very long. And if it became other things I was proudest of, well, There's a couple of things. One, I'm really proud of the happy accident of being asked to help Marvel, to talk Marvel into doing Star Wars, which turned out to be very good. Meant nothing to Star Wars, as it turned out, but meant a lot to Marvel Comics time, which I didn't know until years later. That's kind of nice to be associated with helping save Marvel Comics when all I was trying to do was give myself some interesting work to do for a couple of years. Getting Conan the Barbarian, which helped get Marvel off in a little different direction and do something, a little different. Wasn't intended to be wildly different, but just try something different. From a personal viewpoint, the thing I most enjoyed ever doing was All-Star Squadron at DC. But that was still kind of trying to write in a Marvel way, with as little input from the editors as humanly possible. But so just different things. It's not so much proud. I feel very lucky in having had a chance to do it all, because all I was trying to do was, I came to New York to be the assistant editor of the Superman comics. You talk about a non-creative job, that would have been answering Superman letters pages and trying to figure out what the newest shade of kryptonite lipstick was. That's all I thought I was going to have to do in doing it. It turned out after 2 weeks that my life kind of changed. So, I feel very lucky, and it's all been with all the downs and the this and that over the years and things going wrong. The overall thing to me has always been, a very happy, lucky, career, and I'm really glad I had it. And thanks to all of you who bought any of those books, so that as opposed to stealing them, so that at least I could, I could make my mortgage payments and whatever I had to make over the years. We tried to get back a little value in return.
Nice.
Ditto. Whenever you're working on, a title or a character, I feel at a certain level you have to fall in love with that character, because for you guys it's 15, 20 minutes. For us, it's weeks, and endless weeks, because you finish one issue and then you've got to start the next issue. So you really have to enjoy spending time with those characters. So when it comes to the work, I love them all and everything. I think if I can point to one thing that I think I did right, I'm going to say that Marvel Masterworks, which was one of those goofy things. The president of the company came in and said to me, "We're going to be short on the budget this year. We have to come up with something to make a lot of money before the end of the year. What ideas do you have?" And I said, "None, but when are we going to discuss this?" He said, "Tomorrow morning." Okay, I'll come up with something. And I thought, what did I want to see when I was a kid? What I always remembered thinking about when I was a kid was, man, someday I want to go into a library and see like the first 10 issues of the Fantastic Four in a hardcover book. And first 10 issues of Spider-Man. And I came in the next day and I proposed that. And I remember Jim Galton looked at me, the president of the company, said, "You think anybody's going to pay for those hardcover books?" And this lady in charge of the sales department, a woman named Carol Taylor, said, "I do."
Bless her heart.
Bless her heart.
She was right.
She was right. And they're still doing the Marvel Masterworks.
How many? Like 200-300 of them now? I got them all, but I haven't counted them.
I only get the ones with the titles that I like. I'm not going to tell you the ones I don't get. But I look back on that and I say, I'm still glad that I did that, because now when I want to read early Stan and Jack Avengers story or Fantastic Four or what are your stories? Yeah. I go and pull out my Masterworks and just get to be a little kid.
Because I know a lady who worked in the sales department about that time, about in that same time in General Period, and she was always talking about how most of the salespeople, their whole thing was nobody is going to pay money for a hardcover collection of a bunch of old comic books. That was like a religious view among the suits, and everything. And it's interesting because that was the collective wisdom. It sounds sensible enough, but it was absolutely wrong.
Yes.
Now DC, what's your connection there to DC and its archives, which did come out a little first, didn't it?
No, we came out
first, but you had, because they had a good thing going, and then they blew it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we came out first. All right, I'm going to say something, very inappropriate.
Oh, good.
Okay. But I always felt that, at Marvel, it was our job to come out with things first, and DC would follow us a year later and make it look even better. And I thought, we rushed out the first bunch of Marvel Masterworks, and we didn't design the pages properly or anything else like that. We barely got them out in time to print and make
Then
sure
one of the
they-
Fantastic Fours, I have two versions. One of them had pages missing or in the wrong order. Fantastic Four, which is the second one, because I have two different volumes I saved because there's a page wrong in one of them. Or something. But anyway, go ahead.
and then the following year, DC came out with their archives, and they had hired a book designer, and they looked so much nicer than our books. But I always felt, that's Marvel's job was to, blaze the path, and DC would copy the following year. We did Secret Wars. They came out with Crisis. You do do it because our job is to create, and their job is to copy.
That's what Martin Goodman always told me.
I like that. Any work you're most proud of, Ron?
Who liked Crisis better than Secret Wars?
Everybody did.
Yeah, but
Because-
Secret Wars had the toy line.
Yeah,
so.
but the important part of what he said was Marvel does it first, and then DC does it a year later better.
Yeah, but
Which,
I only kind of dislike Secret Wars. I loathed Crisis
Because they killed off all your
because they
characters.
killed off my entire universe. Right. But other than that, it was a great series.
Yeah, other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the show? Proud? What was the question about being proud of something?
Yeah,
Right?
you're most proud.
Pride isn't something that we have a lot in the comics industry. It's changed, of course, because now, nobody's supposed to care what you do if you're at the laundromat or at the food store or something like that. But if you tell them that your name is at the end of a Marvel movie, they get a kick out of that, that kind of thing. And then they immediately ask you if you've ever met Stan Lee. And if you have, they smile. And if you haven't, they walk away. Yes, like I said before, I've been wanting to do this since I was 6. Tom and I were talking the other day that from the time I was a child, I have in my head some perfect comic books that were just, someday I want to do something that pristine, that they nailed it, that kind of thing. And actually, many on the list are by this gentleman on the end here. And some other luminaries like Archie Goodwin and Sal Buscema and John Buscema and some names you may not know as well, like Johnny Craig, things like that. But anyway, so you always, every month, you're hoping to do that. And we've come close several times for our own, in our own opinion of getting there. And that's part of the journey. I mean, if you reach the top where you think you've reached the top, that's when you start going down. Yeah. I mean, so every month you're trying to do whatever that one thing was that didn't work this month. You try to do it better next month. And that's the mercy of working in periodicals, that kind of thing. So, I mean, I'm very happy with, and as a comics fan, I'm proud of a lot of the work we did. I mean, I can't believe. Well, no, I shouldn't do that. I'm not gonna.
Yeah, and I keep thinking that give me a couple more years and I'll get it right, because
Yeah.
I'm still struggling. And speaking about getting it right, I never told you this, but when Conan #1 came out, I was so impressed with that comic book that I went back to the newsstand. I bought every copy on the newsstand and gave it to all my friends.
Instead of saving them and making yourself a copy.
I was just, wow, this was fabulous. And I thought, my friends like superhero books. They're not going to buy this one. So I bought them all and I handed them out. And
Well, now I understand. The first issue sold pretty well. The second issue sold. You should have kept that up. If you kept that up 7 more issues, we wouldn't have got canceled for one day, you know, which we did after number 7.
you got canceled for
Yeah.
that?
Well, what happened is, I don't even take the thing away from
No,
you,
no.
as long as you mention it. Is that, yeah, Conan sold, I don't remember percentage in small print run, but we sold pretty well, 50-something%, you know, for the first issue, whatever it was. And every issue after that, for the next 7 issues, sold less well than the one before. Bottoming out with number 7, that was the word. And at that stage, Stan was kind of upset because he liked Barry Smith's work, which was developing. And he said, but he knew that Barry really liked doing Conan, you know. He was still over in England that time, he'd been shipped out to England, but he was drawing from there. He says, you know, Conan's going nowhere. Every issue sells less well. He says, maybe so he decided he was going to, he didn't usually cancel, but I mean, Martin Goodman was there, so he was still there as publisher. He's the guy who really made those decisions. But somehow, I don't know exactly how it happened, but Stan got Goodman to actually cancel Spider-Man. Not because the sales were that disastrously bad, though they were, you know, could have got there pretty fast, but because it was his way of getting Barry Smith into another book. And I was out that day for some reason or other working home. I came back the next day and found about it. And I just hit the roof, which I did not often do with Stan. And I said, you know, you want to take Barry Smith off the book? Take him. I'll find somebody else, you know. Okay, we'll do something else. It's not selling, they said. But don't kill a book to get the artist off. You're the editor, you know, take him off. You know, you have the authority. Even if I wanted him to be kept on, and I did. But I said, so he says, well, so he got it put back on for 1 more month. But then at the same time, but in the meantime, for about a month before, he had come to me and he says, I've been looking at this Conan as the sales were going down those first few issues. He says, you got too many goddamn animals. He says, look, you got a spider, you got a bat, you got a girl changing into a tiger. It's not even a real tiger, it's a girl, you know. You got apes on the second one, you know, and so forth. And the last one, you have a man-headed snake. It says, there's no people in this book. The people want human things. So the next issue, which was based on a fragment by Howard that we turned the story, could have had 1 or 2 covers. It either would have had this monster whom Barry had drawn as like a Gila monster, beautifully, or there were these like several 7 or 8 foot armored skeleton monsters who guarded this tomb in the city. You know, left to our own devices, we might have gone for one, we might have gone for the other. With Stan's little victim in turn, I said, we're going for the skeletal warriors. So we have these Conan surrounded by skeletal warriors. The book picked up. It was the first time that it reversed. The next issue probably would have been okay anyway, because that's the one that had a bat-winged guy as the villain, and so forth. But after that, those 7th issue, once with that, so I feel Stan kind of, despite the fact that he already said he knew nothing about sword and sorcery, but he knew a lot about what the readers like. And he said they don't want those, quote, goddamn animals. They want people. And after that, so Stan, you know, really, you know, in addition to being one of the main reasons we did Conan in the first place, because readers were telling me to do it, so he pushed me to do it. But also he helped save it later on. So the guy who knew nothing about sword and sorcery was as responsible as anybody for the success of the book. Once he got over this ridiculous idea about killing the book in order to free Barry Smith.
Yeah, right.
But anyway, that's the weird story of Conan, which is one of the oddest little things that happened.
Who wouldn't want Barry on their book, right? For
Right.
sure. All right, I want to open it up for some questions from the audience. You know, I don't want to hog all the time. So who's got? I see a hand right here.
What comic got you interested in? You mentioned Spider-Man, but what can you say a specific comic that got you interested? Was it the story or the art? And what creator was that? Did you start following that creator?
Who's starting it?
You start.
Me?
You always
Back
start.
in
with-
the-
We're heading
Nobody knew from
chronological.
creators when I was a kid. You know, back in the day, I had to fight the dinosaurs in order to buy my comics from the store back then. They couldn't afford it. But the first thing that I ever really noticed and got passionate about was the Justice Society of America, when I discovered there were 7 characters together in one story and they all knew each other, which just ramped it up tremendously. By that time, I sort of, Joe Kubert signed Hawkman, and his work always fascinated me from the very beginning in anything, but especially on Hawkman. The way he drew him was just so much better than anybody else ever did, before or after. And the rest of the art didn't have to be that good. The concept was that good. So I was never, except for maybe Kubert on Hawkman, but I agreed with when he didn't do it. I was never a follower of any one artist, but I did learn certain people in those first couple of years. Kubert was the first. The second was this guy called Simon Kirby, about 6 or 7, who did, weird little things, stuntman and different things. And it wasn't real superheroes exactly, but they had costumes. And there were a few other guys here and there. I'd run across the name Morton Neskin and different people, but Kubert and Simon Kirby, those I didn't know who Simon Kirby was. And it was one guy or two guys or who did what, and one of them drawing, the other one, colored or whatever it was. But I started following those guys and everything. I followed Kubert, and then he would draw from Hawkman to Tor and Simon Kirby. If they did anything I halfway liked. So those are the people that got me interested.
The first guy that I was really following was Walt Kelly on Pogo comic strip, because I was following comic strips. I remember my first comic was a Batman comic. I don't know what issue or anything. An older cousin gave it to me. It was the first time I had seen a comic book. I remember Batman scared the hell out of me, but I was fascinated by the comic book. And then, pretty well read everything. Hot Stuff, Richie Rich, Archie, you name it. I was following the comics. And the first time I became aware of creators were comic book creators, probably Stan and Jack, because I bought Fantastic Four, I think 3 and 4 together. I saw the title Fantastic Four, and I just assumed it meant there were 4 stories in the book. But realized the Human Torch was on the same, on both covers. And those two comic books just blew me away. I still go back and reread them every once in a while. And they really hooked me on the medium. And I've been a Marvel geek ever since. I'm proud of it.
Hi. I remember the first, well, it might be apocryphal. My brother and I have talked about it. I had a brother 3 years older, and there was a 1964 issue of World's Finest where Superman and Batman are standing over the graves of Jimmy Olsen and Robin. And Jimmy Olsen and Robin are standing in the background going. So it was a very bizarre beginning. But my brother being 3, he would have been like 7. So obviously he was responsible for bringing it in. I would have been like 4. I don't remember a time when I didn't draw. So the picture certainly appealed to me. And then we were children of the Batman TV series and the Hanna-Barbera cartoons and the Filmation cartoons. And I would, that was my, I wanted to draw like that someday. I wanted to keep practicing and do what I could and maybe do something either with animation or with comic books. And it became a very early passion. But as far as recognizing, I remember early on recognizing, like if it had a Kurt Swan cover, but then you opened it up and it was Wayne Boring insides. And I've come to appreciate Mr. Boring's work. But, that was when you were a kid, that was, when the cover was different from the inside, that was false advertising. And I guess Marvel, I discovered Marvel through the Spider-Man 67 cartoon and trading some comics with a local kid and got some old reprints and stuff. And the first one I would have bought off the racks would have been when I was like 7 or 8 and never looked back. I mean, I became, my brother stayed pretty ensconced at DC, but I went full Marvel on him, man. And started, because they had the credits there too. So, I was a big fan of Nick Cardy on Aquaman because they would talk about it in the letter column and stuff. But once you start seeing names like Romita and Buscema and Kirby and it's a whole different ballgame. You start to get to know the personalities involved, or you feel you do, and it lends to the appreciation of the work. And back then, they were there every month. That was one of the things that I've been happy about in my career is that, the people that know my work and are nostalgic about my work because Tom and I were there every month. We did a 7-year run on Thor. That's not really heard of that often anymore. But that's what was great when you were a kid, that it was consistent every month. Then you could forget about the creators and check in with Peter Parker every month, find out what's going on with Pete. And it wasn't a reboot every 3 issues, or every issue had to have some major trauma happen and all that. It's, they've really gotten into a period of trying to one up everything these days instead of leaning into the periodical thing, because I'm not sure are any books actually just monthly now?
Archie, I think
Yeah.
that's about it.
Everything's like a mini series or it folds into something else and all this and that didn't used to be like that. So, I mean, for those of you who are under 30, sorry. There's some really cool stuff in the dollar bins, man. So
Really, really is. All right, anybody else? All right here.
So I believe that's very green when it comes to comic books, but if there's one essential store you would recommend to newcomers, what exactly would it be?
It's a good question.
what's the essential comic fan? Go ahead, Tom. I have no idea. I mean, you're going to say something high-minded, and it's going to annoy me.
No, I'm not going to say anything high-minded. I think, any of the early issues of the Fantastic Four, the Master Planner sequence from Spider-Man, which was, I'm not really good with numbers. It was
like 32, 33, and 34 or something like that, wasn't it? I don't know.
That sounds close enough.
Yeah.
That's basically, Royce Conan.
After issue 7.
Start with issue 1. Each one gets better. Did I ever tell you I was a fan of Conan? I'm a fan of Conan. That's what I throw out.
What kind of stuff do you enjoy? You science fiction? Do you like superheroes from the movies or what?
Well, it's just a combination of just the fact that I can't exactly describe to you the specifics, but I do know that I've been sort of kind of build up a little bit of a collection of sorts to basically read on my own. And in fact, since you guys were talking about Marvel Masterworks,
Yeah, there you
I
go.
actually got this.
See?
The giant size X-Men.
Science
Nice.
X-Men #1.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's good stuff. That's a great place to
That's
start.
a good place to start.
Absolutely.
Those early ones, you obviously didn't know exactly how it was going to go, because #1 is Spider-Man, which annoyed me because it should have been Fantastic Four, but that's okay. And then #2 is Fantastic Four, so they caught up, so that's okay. And then with that, but every one was different. So so they end up with Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3, and it's all different series. And it took a little while for it to kind of straighten out to be, and then you have all these different numbers. Now you've got you have to have the alternates for the 4 people, but what those old covered, and you started all that with that,
Well,
You just can't stop editing. You can't.
Yeah, right.
when we did the first set of 3, we were hoping they would sell well enough for us to do it a second
Yeah,
set.
sure. You weren't thinking, I know you weren't thinking that. Had no reason why you should have been.
Yeah,
No, he was just editor in chief.
I just wanted the company. I just wanted the company to make enough money so it would be a company the following year.
Did it work?
It worked.
Nice. Didn't you also suggest the digest series for Archie?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a big deal for them, right?
Yeah.
Bigger marbles and littler arches. That's a good plan.
Yeah. So,
I like that.
But I stole the idea. I'll confess. Weston was doing the digest books first,
Okay.
and I remember seeing the digest books, and I said, I was working at Archie, and John Goldwater, the president of the company, walked in one day, and I said, "Hey, Mr. Goldwater, I think we should be doing comics in this format because it'll be perfect for us because we have smaller balloons and everything else." And he looked at me and said, don't waste my time with this stupid nonsense. And he walked out. Okay, I was used to getting yelled at. So I went back to my desk, and about 2 or 3 days later, he comes in. He says, "You know, gentlemen, I have this great idea."
We don't use it.
And he holds up the book I had given him. I think this would be perfect for us. And then he walks out, and I remember Victor Gorlick, who was at Archie forever, taught me everything I know, but not everything he knew. And he looked at it, and turned to me, and said, "It's your mess. This is your problem now." and that is the true origin of Archie Digest, and they're still doing them. And,
Yeah.
and the nice thing is they ask me to do stories for them.
Oh, that's
every
nice.
once in a while. So I'm still doing.
Got one right there?
Well, can I give
Oh, yeah, go
to
ahead.
answer your question though? There's so much material out there and so many different genres. You could ask everybody in here, and you get a different answer from every single one of them.
Well, yeah, like the other two books I forgot to mention was Will Eisner's The Spirit and Rock Raccoon.
Real Weisner's The Spirit is a fantastic place to start. The man knew more about this business and storytelling than anybody. So that's a great place to start.
You're going from a writer to editor-in-chief. If you take the example of Thor, you were writing that for 7 years, and somebody else comes in and looks at all the time. He'll say, well, Simonson, he can't even change some of that. If you're an editor-in-chief, if you have to tell people, look, you're going to have to change this, or you're thinking maybe, I wish I hadn't thought of that, but there are instances where you have to tell people that you can't do this.
It's the line editor's job.
Yeah.
You had line editors.
Well, yeah.
We had a couple of assistants that tried to spell things right.
I had a couple of rules for my editors. You know, any major change of status quo, you had to run past this. Because I didn't want to find out that a character got married, had a baby, something like that in the comic books. I didn't want to find out a major character had been killed. I wanted to know about this stuff in advance because I thought consistency works in comics. And otherwise I thought, you guys were, you were hard because you have good taste. So exercise that good taste. And very rarely did I have to say no to things. A couple of times I had to say no because, somebody got into a big fight with an editor because he wanted to make a major change with Spider-Man. And decided to go over the editor's head and confronted me with this. And, his idea was he thought that it would be a good idea to rip off one of Spider-Man's arms because this would be something we've never seen a major character lose an arm before. And now he would have to, deal with that crisis. And it's interesting because it means he can't web swing anymore. And I said, I don't think this is a good idea. I said, if you want to create a character who loses his arm and, you start from there and deal with it, that sounds like a good idea to me. But Spider-Man, I don't think it works.
So basically, Spider-Man losing an arm didn't have any legs for you.
Yeah.
There was nowhere to go with it.
And I will tell you, and I'm curious if Roy had the same experience, at least once a month, someone who'd never written a Spider-Man story would come in and propose the death of Aunt May.
Only once a month?
At least once a month.
Now she's died like 9 times.
Because they say, this will be a great story. We're going to, come in and we're going to kill off Aunt May. And I said, okay. And then what? Because they're monthly comic books.
Yeah.
And then after that,
She's only an aunt.
So I was told I was closed-minded a number of times. And I probably was. Probably still am.
The only reason they ever did the death of Superman was because Mike Carlin asked the question, and then what?
Yeah.
And they came up with Funeral for a Friend and The Reign of the Superman, and that's why they decided to do it.
Okay, yeah.
there was-
We had, we talked about, you had your line editors. We didn't know from that
Yeah.
first. I mean, it was Stan, it was me, and, a couple of guys that did proofreading, but they were talented guys. Some of them were also writers, but they had no authority particularly to do anything except, come to me or something and ask about something. What we had instead of, what the editors you had after we, especially around the post-shooter system after that, was we had guys we called writers. And they functioned as the editor. They could have also been the artists. In a couple of cases, they were artist editors, but we just gave the writers that kind of power because the writers were the ones who were giving the direction to the book for the most part. If they didn't come up above it, most of it came from the writers, and or sometimes the writer and artist working together, like a Starlin and Engelhardt on Master Kung Fu or something like that. So, but it was the same kind of system. We just had different names for it. The writers were kind of unpaid, as I had been before, sort of unpaid editors. But in exchange for that unpaid editorial work of having to kind of keep track of things and this and that, they got a lot of freedom where they didn't have to come to me with every single change they wanted to make. Yeah, if they're going to kill a character, tear off his arm, or anything like that, they had to get permission. But otherwise, let them go and give them a lot of rope. One particular thing, I think, is when a guy like Steve Englehart, I'd been doing Avengers for 7 issues in a row with some success, and had to give it up because I became editor-in-chief, and I felt that was an easier thing to give up than the coding work. I'd done so many already, and et cetera. But so I gave it to Steve. But when I did, I didn't give him a lot of instruction about what he had to do. He took the Scarlet Witch Vision romance, which had been kind of started under me, and Neil had done a little here and there. He took it in his own direction. Eventually, he had somebody marry a tree in that book, I think. But we tried to give him a lot of leeway. It made, as a result, the 70s under me and then Marv, Len, et cetera, and Jerry's 20 minutes. And there were some wild things happened that maybe shouldn't have happened. A few things got a little weird, a little wacky. But on the other hand, when these weird and wacky things happened, they were things that, some of them led to productive directions, whether Howard the Duck, because Steve Gerber threw that into a book, or Jim Starlin just wanted to take my old the Warlock character and do something crazy with him. And I said, hey, it wasn't going anywhere. Do what you want to do with it, within reason and so forth, and things like that. And you got a lot of some bad work, kind of mediocre work that wasn't that awful, but still not too great. Other stuff, you got some really great stuff from that period. I think the worst trouble Marvel ever had over that kind of thing, was when Jerry and John, with my backing, decided to kill off Gwen, and somehow Stan decided he was out of town that week, and didn't know about it. Of course, it was not true. He just convinced himself of that. And my statement on it was very simple. I said, the mothers of John Romita, Jerry Conway, and Roy Thomas did not have any children stupid enough to kill off Spider-Man's girlfriend while Stan Lee was out of town. And it just didn't happen. Eventually, he decided, that maybe he'd signed off on it. Reluctantly, he never liked the idea. But again, he gave him permission because, as Tom was just saying, killing off Aunt May, which Jerry and John considered, that wouldn't mean anything because it's a slight lack in his life. He'd been a little sad, but what super change is he going to have? He doesn't even barely lives with her anymore. He was practically a grown guy. A little sorrow, and that's it. You kill off Gwen Stacy, you got a real, major plot change, which caused Jerry Conway not to be able to go to the conventions for 2 or 3 years because he was getting death threats and still is affecting people and so forth. 40, 50 years later, that's a major sequence. So it must have been a good idea, bad, good, bad, or ugly. It was a major idea. You can't beat that. It sold a lot of comics, and it's got people still talking about it decades later.
One more question right over there.
Speaking a bit more about continuity, with property and Harold's comic story, we can see he's not Bell, he's a pirate, mercenary, eventually a king. And then in the 1960s, Spider-Man comics, we see the story's pretty much in real time. It doesn't take long for Peter to get out of high school. But since then, it's been a lot of reboots and stuff like that. Would you like to see a lot of these characters in the mainstream universe age up, have kids and grandkids, and develop other characters along with them? Or do you like to stand up
Can I? You want me to take it? There's the illusion of change is always very important to a character, but there is no way that the kids who are coming up now don't deserve to have a Spider-Man they can relate to as a young man. I would recommend Spider-Girl. It ran for about 13, 14 years. It showed a 40-ish Pete and a 40-ish Mary Jane with a teenage daughter, and a lot of people liked it because Pete aged, because he aged up and became a dad, and we got to see Pete evolve and everything. But those continuity questions, that's what you need to ask yourself. Are you the generation of comics readers that are so special that the characters should age with you? Now, in the case of the Phantom, I would say yes. In the case of other characters, I would say that. In the case of Superman, I would say no. He should stay eternally 29. And I think Pete should be eternally a young person who is, learning the ropes and all that kind of stuff. I mean, he's a veteran superhero, but he doesn't know everything. That's the charm of Peter Parker. And I think every kid coming up reading Spider-Man deserves to have a Pete that they can relate to. And the fact that they're doing other titles where he's back in high school or movies where he's back in high school, and it doesn't bother me a bit. I hope it doesn't bother anybody else, because they also do this Spider-Man Reign. And if you want to see a dark future for Spider-Man, there's plenty of material out there. If you want to see a one that's actually a bright future that starts with him getting his leg blown off, try Spider-Man.
When Spider-Man
Wait
started,
a minute, you stole the losing the arm idea for Spider-Girl. That's not his fault. He just wanted to mess up his knee. I'm the one that said, let's blow his leg off. So
when Spider-Man started, he was older than I am. Nobody wants to see a 70-year-old superhero.
All right, everybody, be sure to check these gentlemen out over at their booths. They're signing books. They'll have stories. They'll have conversation. Thank you for being here. Thank you for gracing us with your presence. Everybody give them a round of applause. Thank you so much.
thank you. Thanks for coming out, everybody.
I want to know more about Spider-Man. Are these recordings available?
They're on. They streamed them on Facebook, I think.
So they're available to watch later?
Yeah, you should be able to. Yeah, definitely on their Facebook page. I don't know what YouTube channel it would be. But yeah.
That Kurt Swan, the guy that got rid of Marvel. I would have bought all those Marvel comics in the 60s.
I look back on this stuff now, and when they first started doing credits, and I wasn't necessarily thinking, like the early Irv Novick stuff or something. I like his early stuff as much as I like his later stuff, Jim Aparo, and all that kind of stuff.
Like you said, open up to see Wayne Boring. He's an acquired taste, I guess. But,
he is. Well, it's all.
I used to like the 80-page Giants where Kurt would be the front page over there.
I'm about to send Darren over here to start this. What'd it say?
There's 4 of them.
Yeah.